were lined up in the rows of 5, and we met Dr. Joseph Mengele. Dr. Mengele we call Doctor of Death. He selected people for human experiment or for the gas chamber. So Dr. Mengele said there's 6 kilometers to walk to the camp. He's going to select people to go to the left. The people on the left are going to be taken on trucks. So he went through and he picked out sick people, old people, young kids. And I was a little guy. He picked me out too to go to the left. But before we go into the questions, also, let me tell you, I was in 3 camps where I had to witness people being hung. Trying to run away. They get cut.
Thanks for being back to Growth Factor. Today we have Mr. Joseph Alexander and his girlfriend, Reva Sherman. How long have you two been dating before we get into your Holocaust survival story, Joe?
For 23 years.
23 years, beautiful. Because I know everyone wanted to see Reva. That's why I have her on camera. And you can see this little, Joe's very professional. He's got a green screen, so it's a little ghosty for a moment, but so I wanted to start, Joe, if you can just tell your story about the Holocaust. What age were you? What year was it when the whole thing started?
Okay. Yeah. I was 16 when the war started. And, I lived in a small town named Koval.
How do you spell that?
I spell Kowal. I had a nice family. I had parents, 3 sisters, and 2 brothers, and I'm the only survivor. We had, my father was in business, and we had a very good life until 1939, when the Germans came into Poland. They divided Poland in 2 halves. One half was annexed to the Third Reich. The second part was Poland under German occupation. We lived on the part where it was annexed to the Third Reich. And after a year, some of you probably know, the kids maybe don't know, but people know that Europe, every town is a town square. And that's where most of the business are. And we lived in the town square. Excuse me. At one corner, we were the second house, and the third house was an uncle of mine. After a few weeks, the Germans came to town, and they went after my uncle, and they went around the square and told the people they have 10 minutes to get their possession and get out in the middle of the square, and they took them away. For some reason, which I'll never know, why they left those 3 houses where we were the second house. So a rumor started that they're going to come back 3 days later and take the rest of us. So my father had 3 sisters living 25 kilometers before Warsaw, which was the other half of Poland. So Dad said, we're not going to wait for them to give us 10 minutes to get out. So he got out and rented a wagon. We had deep wagons, about 6-8 feet deep. And we packed up most of the stuff from the store and put a few pieces of bedding on top with a couple pieces of furniture. And my parents and 1 sister and 1 brother, they left. They left to go to the other parts of Poland. The reason we had to put a few bedding on top, because from our part to the other part you have to go through a border. So like we're moving. So they left, and I remained with two older sisters, and we were loading up a second wagon. In the meantime, we had the Polish people from around town coming to town trying to buy anything they can get. So I sold a bicycle to one man in a boat of shirt material. And on the way home, he had to pass the police station. So he got stopped, and they wanted to know where did he get that material. He thought maybe the people were looting already when we took the business out. No, he said, I bought it. Then show me a receipt. He said, I don't have a receipt. Then go bring the person who sold it to you. So he came back to me. He said, you have to come with me. If not, they're going to come here. And we had a wagon loaded, ready to go. So I went with him to the police station, and he asked me, did you sell him that? I said, yes. Why didn't you give him a receipt? I see we in Poland, we didn't give receipts. So he took the boat, the material, smacked the guy and go and let me go. And I went back. My sisters were waiting for me, and we took off. We went to a little town named Bologna, about 25 kilometers before Warsaw. So we came there. Their life was going on almost normal still. People were still in business, but everybody had to go to work. So being there for about a couple of weeks, I went to my first camp. That was 1939. Went to a camp where we worked during the week. On the weekend, you can go home. But the work we were doing was building a canal. We stayed in the water up to the knee, and that was in October, November already. That's like winter time in Europe, without boots. So after a few weeks, I got blood poisoning. I got sores on my legs, on my arms. So one weekend I went home and I said, I'm not coming back. So Monday morning, the police came to look for me. So my dad said, he's not here. He's supposed to be in the camp. So I stayed away from home for a while and figured things to cool off. And that was the time where they started to build the wall in Warsaw, where the Warsaw ghetto was going to be. So after they got through building the wall, they came out with an order, all the Jews who live within 50 or 60 kilometers in the surrounding area of Warsaw had to move into Warsaw to the ghetto. So the place they picked out was a very small area, and they put over 400,000 people in. So you can imagine the life was miserable, was so bad. It's hard to describe even. People, dead people on the streets, on the sidewalks, everywhere. I lived in the ghetto for almost 5 months, and we found out that back home, since we left, nothing changed. Everything remained the same. So my parents decided for an older sister and had a younger brother and me, we should go back home. So go back home to have to get out of the ghetto. So we paid off the guards at the gate to get out. We got out and we decided my sister and brother take one street and I'll take another street. And we walk through town, and we meet on the outskirts of town. I've walked for about 2 or 3 blocks and had a Polish teenager comes over and says, give me some money or I'm going to report you. So I figured I gave him some money, I got rid of him, and I kept walking. Well, he got on the streetcar, rode the streetcar for a few blocks, and he comes over again, give me some more money. So this time I gave him some more money, but I changed the street and I lost him. So went to the outskirts of town. I met my sister and brother, and we went home. We got home, we said everything not the same since we left, nothing changed. But it lasted 3 days. I was free for 3 days. After being there for 3 days, they came out all the Jewish men from 16 to 60, a report to the schoolhouse. So I had to report to the schoolhouse, and off I went to the camps. And that's I was going from camp to camp. I survived 12 camps. The first camp I went to there was we were building a dam. Building the dam, we cut down some hills, and we had little electric cars to fill them up, and they take them another place and they dump it. The work we doing that was very hard work because we had to use picks to loosen up the ground. And the food you were getting was like a piece of bread like this in the morning, and a cup of coffee, and you went to work. You came back from work, you got a soup, which most of the time was from the peels of potatoes or spinach. And from that food, you couldn't survive. The only way you could survive is because we worked with civilians. If you managed just to get just a little extra food, that's the only way you could survive. And this camp there's one of the cities named Poznań in Poland, one of the biggest cities. And there were camps in the cities and around the city, a lot of sub-camps. So that food couldn't survive. So people were dying every day. They took people every morning. They took out a lot of dead people. And the same thing happened at the other camps. So when the camp got very small, they combined 1, 2, 3 camps into one. After a while, the same thing happened at this camp. This is why I was moving. I was moved to another camp. I moved to another camp where I was doing cobblestones laying on the streets. I was a roofer. I was laying sewers, building sewers, laying the cement there. Then another one I was building an airport. I was laying railroad tracks. After being in 7 camps, a train arrived. And it wasn't a passenger train, the cattle car train, where they put 40, 50 people to one boxcar. So the train arrived, and the destination we were going, it takes 5, maybe 6 hours at the most. But we were riding around for 3 days, no food, no water, nothing, no facility. So we arrived in Auschwitz. By the time we came to Auschwitz, there's a little town named Schwenchen. So the train stopped downtown. Later on, they built the trains to go straight into the camps. But when I came, that was in 43, they didn't have that yet. So the train stopped downtown, and they opened the doors. About 30-40% of the people were dead on the train already. Whoever could walk, you walked out, lined up in the rows of 5, and we met Dr. Joseph Mengele. Dr. Mengele we called Doctor of Death. He selected people for human experiment or for the gas chamber. So Dr. Mengele said there's 6 kilometers to walk to the camp. He's going to select people to go to the left. The people on the left are going to be taken on trucks. So he went through and he picked out sick people, old people, young kids. And I was a little guy. He picked me out too to go to the left. If I would come from home, I wouldn't know the difference. But I was already in 7 camps. And most of the time, I went to go to work. I got into groups where the biggest, strongest men were. And here tells me to go to the left, and I look around. I see sick people, old people, young kids. That's not the kind of people I like to be with. My luck was it was after midnight. If daytime, I don't think I could have done it. When Dr. Mengele moved further down, I ran back to the other side. If I didn't run back to the other side, I wouldn't be here talking to you today.
Let me understand. Was the people to the left would lose their life? You moved over to the right. Those are the people who were going to live?
Yes. Because I moved over to the right, then we walked to the camp. People on the left were taken on trucks, went straight to the gas chamber. So I moved to the right back and I went to Auschwitz. I got a shower and I came out of the shower. I got a tattoo. I got a number, you can see here, 142584. And from that moment on, that was your name. You had no name anymore. I got a tattoo and we walked over. There's Auschwitz too, it's called Birkenau. We walked over to Birkenau, it's about 3 kilometers. We walked over to Birkenau, and I was in Birkenau for quite a few months. And I saw Dr. Mengele 2 more times in Birkenau, but it was daytime and he was far away from where I was. So I got through. And then I saw in Birkenau, people were running to the electric fence to get electrocuted. I saw people being beaten to death because they gave up, you know. So I was in Birkenau for a while. And then that was around the time when the Warsaw ghetto uprising was. It was in April 1943. After the ghetto uprising, they said they need a big transport, but they didn't want to take the people from Poland. They only wanted people from Hungary, Greece, Italy. But on the end, they were short about 300 people. So they said, now we'll take some people from Poland. So I report, got on the train, the same thing, about 3 days riding with nothing. And I went back to the Warsaw ghetto for the second time for me. So I came back to Warsaw. In the ghetto, there was nothing left. All the houses were burned out. There were just remaining walls. And our job was take down these walls brick by brick and clean them up and put them up in stacks about 8-10 feet high. But there was no camp. They gave us some prefabs. So we had to put it together, our own barracks, our own camps. And we had no showers, no facilities until we built the camp. So before we built the camp for the showers, there was no shower, so the shirt I was wearing, there was no shirt left. It was shreds. It was eaten up from lice. And then we got the shower. So on Sunday, you got a shower and you got some fresh clothes. Then the typhus broke out.
Typhus?
Typhus. Typhus is the high temperature. You get high fever, high temperature. Anybody who reported to the hospital, I never knew anybody who came out. I got this high temperature, high fever temperature, but I didn't report to the hospital because, excuse me, but I had a capo, we called it, like a foreman, you know.
A capo, K-A-P-O, right? Capo.
Yes. We call it capo, but they like a foreman, you know. And he was a middle-aged man. He was a German man. He was also a prisoner. So he didn't care if we work or didn't work. And when I got that temperature, I was sitting like my arms crossed over like this for about 3 days behind those bricks.
Was this winter or summer?
It was summer. I was staying there for about 3 days like this, and until I got over the temperature, and I went back to work. And I was working for a while, and then one night, the Polish underground attacked our camp. They wanted to try to free us.
The Polish underground, these are people from Poland?
Yes.
Oh.
They attacked our camp, but they were fighting all night. They were unsuccessful.
Mm.
So the next morning, they closed the camp. They took us out. And to get out of town, we had to jog because they're afraid. They said the underground may attack us in the city.
Mm.
So to jog to get out, and they put us up on a big field where the farmers graze their cows. And the ground is very moist. So they put us up on that field, and whatever means you had, a knife, a spoon, anything, that you can dig up some mud in the ground, and you took the bottom of the shirt, and squeezed to get a little water.
Mm.
So we got a little water. The next morning, we're on the march. We come to a city, and there was a river. So they let us go to the river to get some water. Two of our people went a little too far in the river. They thought maybe they wanted to escape, get out on the other side. They got killed, got shot right in the river. So we had some water and we start walking. And we came walking. The next day we come to a second town where it was the same river, but I said this time only 100 people at a time can go to the river to get some water. So we got some water, and then we start walking. And that day there was very heavy rain was coming down that you were soaking wet. You could hardly walk until we arrived at the railroad station and got on the train. And at this time we were 3.5 days riding with food, no water, nothing. So we went to Germany to a camp named Dachau. Dachau was the first camp Hitler built in 1933 for political prisoners. Then he turned it into concentration camps with the gas chambers. So I came to Dachau for about 2 weeks. I didn't do anything because they were establishing about 12 camps within the surrounding area, within 50, 60 kilometers surrounding Dachau. They were all by numbers, 1 to 12. So after about 2 weeks, I was sent to camp number 1, and I was working for a farmer who was digging potatoes. That wasn't too bad because we made a fire and we kept switching over and somebody was baking potatoes. So everybody got some baked potatoes. That lasted about 3 weeks. Then I was sent to a camp 50 kilometers from Dachau to a city of Landsberg am Lech. And that was camp number 7. Camp number 7 was a small camp with only about 150 people. And there that's the only camp I was where women were in the same camp, but they were blocked off one corner of the camp by a wire fence. But we went to work together. So we were a group, but we were in the camps over 4 years already. So we had the privilege of getting the better jobs.
What year is this now? And is this Germany?
That's in Germany. So we got a little better job. My friends were like in the kitchen. Some of them were the police in the camp. And a couple others one was a carpenter, a metalsmith guy. So, and I got a group we were 5 girls and 5 boys. And we worked in the kitchen right outside the camp, right outside the fence for the German guards. And there were 2 men in charge of the kitchen, 2 German men, but they were very good. They were very good to me.
Oh, good.
Every day after work, I went back to the camp. I took some food for my friends, and we always had soup left over. So we had some big milk cans. I took a milk can and put the soup in. The
And what
next
year
morning,
is this now? What year is this?
that
1940?
was already end of 44, beginning of 45. So I put it in the can, and the next morning people were going to work. They had to pass our kitchen, so I stopped and gave them some food. So a couple of times, the officer in charge of the guard complained that I'm holding up the people going to work. So my people told me, don't worry, let them talk, do what you're doing.
Oh, good.
That lasted until April 28, 1945. All the 12 camps had to go back to Dachau. So we came back to Dachau, stayed overnight on a big field there. And the next morning, we were going what they call a death march. And they're supposed to take us into the mountains in Germany. There's a ski resort named Garmisch, and that's where they're supposed to kill us. We walked for about 2 days, and we knew we're not going to be walking too far because we could hear the fighting. We knew that the American troops are not far behind us. So we walked for 2 days, and we crossed a little bridge, and the little bridge was blown up. So our group was divided in two halves. I was on the half where we were in a village in Königdorf. And in that village was a little forest. So they took us into the forest and they asked for volunteers to take the sick people into and put them into the farmers. So one of the volunteers was a friend of mine, and on the way back, they found a dead horse in the snow. Excuse me, dead horse in the snow, and they cut up some pieces from the horse. And this is a friend of mine. His name was Joe Buddha.
There you go. Okay, who is that?
Joe Buddha.
Your friend Joe Buddha.
Yeah.
And this is when you were all going to farms.
Yes. So that he was the one we got. He came back with a piece of meat like this. We were in the forest. So I made a fire and I was barbecuing. Believe me, that was the best meal we had in a long time.
Yeah.
And during the night, the guards disappeared. So the next morning, the German police came and they took us into the village and they disappeared. That was in the morning between 8 and 9 o'clock. So we were just walking around the village trying to find out what's going to happen next. So about between 12 and 1 o'clock, American tank moved in and we were liberated. And behind the tanks were the American troops. So they're trying to block off the village, not to let anybody out.
Do you remember the date when you knew the Americans were coming? What was the date?
The date was May 1st. May 1st, 1945. And so, but we were a group, 9 of us. We didn't want to get blocked in. So we broke through to try to see where the next town is. So we walked for about 1 or 2 kilometers. There was a bakery. So we got in the bakery and everybody got a bread. Mm-hmm. You had a bread, you were okay.
Yeah.
And we start walking and come to a town named Bad Tölz, about 40 kilometers from Munich. And you see 3 American soldiers. They're walking, but they couldn't even walk. They were holding on to each other. They were drunk. So drunk that they couldn't walk by themselves. So they're holding on to each other. So they asked, I guess the clothes we were wearing, they asked us, are you Polish? So we told them yes. So they said, come on. So they took us in to an underground bunker. It was a warehouse. You couldn't see the end of it. It was so big. Probably everything you can think of was in that warehouse. So first thing, we changed clothes. Everybody took a backpack and put some food in. And there was a big row of bicycles chained up. They broke the chain and they gave us a bicycle. Now we have to find a place to stay, because when the American troops came into the village after the tank, they brought all the people to this same town. It used to be a German Air Force base. They made a DP camp, displaced person camp. Well, we didn't want to go to a camp. So we tried to get out on the street. We couldn't because it was after 6 o'clock, and 6 o'clock was curfew. So we hopped over about 3 or 4 fences and we came to a German inn, but it was taken over by the American troops. In the back of the inn was an empty house, so we took over the house. We stayed in the house for 10 days, and then they came out to order anybody who lives outside the camp had to move into the camp. So moved into the camp. We were taken back to Munich, to another DP camp in Munich. But you were free. You could live at the camp or you can go any place you want. So I lived at the camp in Munich about 3 days. And a couple of friends of mine and I decided to go back to the city of Landsberg, where camp number 7 was, where we were. And Landsberg had the biggest DP camp in Germany. There were a lot of DP camps, but Landsberg was one of the biggest. So we went back there. So I didn't want to live in the camp, but we went to the camp in a register, and they gave us a room. I stayed overnight. And the next morning, I moved out about 7 kilometers to a farm, and I lived in a farmhouse. The reason we went to the camp to register, because there was a lot of camps. So we went to register all the camps in case any of your family survived. So everybody went to look through the lists, you know. So I lived in the farm for about 6 weeks, and I decided to go back to Poland, to my hometown, go back to my house to see if anybody in my family survived. Because when I got out of the Warsaw ghetto, I left my parents, 2 sisters, and 1 brother in the Warsaw ghetto. And I still don't know what happened. So I went back to Poland, went to the house. There were survivors living on the 2nd floor. On the 1st floor was Polish people living. But they said none of my immediate family came back. The only one who came back was a cousin of mine. He was 2 years younger than I, but we got separated in Auschwitz when Dr. Mengele told me to go to the left. Mm-hmm. And I was there with him and 2 of his uncles, 2 of his father's brothers. We were separated. He is the one who survived. That's on this picture right here. We can see it.
He's a cousin?
Yeah. His name was Mark Alexander. We had the same last name. So he survived, but he was in a different town. And at that time, it was very bad for survivors who came back in Poland. They killed a lot of survivors. In one town, they killed a city named Kielce. They killed 42 survivors, Kielce. And 42 they killed in this one town. So it was very bad for survivors.
You're saying if you came back, you wanted to take your home back, the Polish people were living there, so they would kill the Jewish people because they didn't want to give up the home that they stole.
Yeah, no, but on the 1st floor was on the 2nd floor, there were survivors living. Even actually the ones living, the Polish people on the second floor, on the bottom floor, they asked me if I'm going to stay, they'll move out. I said, no, don't bother. But lots of them, when they took the Jews out, they moved into their homes. And some of the survivors are coming back now. So they killed a lot of them because they didn't want to give up the home. So it was very bad. So I was told my cousin survived and he's in a different town. So I went and I got him and we went back to Germany. And I lived in Germany for 4 more years after the liberation. I lived for 4 years in Germany because you didn't have a passport. You couldn't go any place. You had to wait until some country opens up, wants to take you in. So after 4 years, Canada said they'll take some people. So we went to register. And it took a long time. It didn't call you because you had to wait until they call you. It took a long time. We didn't hear from them. In the meantime, another friend of mine lived in the next village. He came and said, Joe, you can go to Munich now and register to go to America. So I went to register, and a very short time, I think only about 2 weeks, I had a notice to go to get checked out by an American doctor and then by the FBI. And then I got a note to go to Bremerhaven at the port in Germany to get the boat to come to America. And I went and I got the boat and I arrived in America on May 30th, 1949. So I came to New York. Everybody had to have a sponsor. Either you have relatives here or an organization to sponsor you. I didn't have any relatives. I was sponsored by a Jewish organization named Joint. And my contract was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So I went to Harrisburg and worked in Harrisburg for a man who a father couldn't be better than he was to me.
What was his name? What was your father figure's name?
Whose name?
What was his name, and was he Jewish or Christian?
No, he was Jewish. His name was Kaplan.
Kaplan?
Yeah. Max Kaplan.
Max Kaplan.
Yeah. He was Jewish. Yeah. He came here in the 20s. He was also from Poland. So he was very good to me. But then when I came in May, and my cousin who survived, he had an uncle here in Santa Monica. So he came in October, and he came to Santa Monica, and then he told his uncle that I'm in Pennsylvania, in Harrisburg, and we were the only 2 survivors from both of our families. So the uncle called me a few times I should come here so I would be together. So I came in 1950, I came to California, and here I am. But before we go into the questions, also, let me tell you, I was in 3 camps where I had to witness people being hung. Trying to run away. They got cut, and on Sunday we had to gather around watching being hung. I had to watch 3 times this. So now, if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that, because when I met you in Moore Park and you were speaking, people wanted to know what happened to people who escaped, and you did explain that to us, that every Sunday the people who tried to escape were hung. Were there any females? Was it mostly males trying to escape, or what percentage of females tried to escape?
Male, mostly male.
Yeah.
If there are any females, I didn't hear any, I didn't see anything.
And you also said sometimes people would take their own life by running into the electric fence, right?
Yes, that's what I said before. That was in Birkenau. Here is something. I don't know. Can you see this?
Well, I took a copy of that when I met you, so I'll be able to show it also.
Oh, yeah. This is the liberation from Dachau. And then I have one from Auschwitz.
Do you have papers from when you were liberated? They gave you
Yes,
papers?
those are papers from liberated. Auschwitz.
How did you eventually get to America without a passport, without identification?
Well, I told you through the joint, America, through the joint.
Joint is the group that helped Jewish people come to America?
Yes.
And while you're looking for your papers, I know people are going to want to know.
Yeah, here it is. Yeah. That's the one from Auschwitz. There it shows that on the bottom, if you can see it, there's my tattoo, 142584.
And that's your paper from being released from Auschwitz?
Yes. And there's one from Munich. And on this one here, on here it shows you that I was in the camps from 1939 to May 2nd, 1945. Now, in 2015 here, I was invited by the German government to come to celebrate 70 years the liberation of Dachau. And we were there for 5 days. We were treated, you couldn't get better treatments we got. And I saw, can you, I don't know if you can.
If you pull it towards your face, we might be able to see is that the British Prime Minister Merkel? How do you say her name?
Yeah.
Or German?
Yeah.
Wait, who's that?
German. Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany. Yeah, I talked to her in Dachau. I talked to her.
What did she say?
Well, what I told her, actually, she was very good for Israel. I told her I liked what she was doing for Israel. She should keep on doing it. Keep on helping Israel. So she said she will. That's what she told.
And then you went to Santa Monica, California.
Came to Santa Monica, but then I didn't stay much in Santa Monica. I lived in Victorville.
Victorville, yeah.
That was the time, 1950, the Korean War started. Victorville was a big Air Force base for World War II. Then in 1946, they closed the base. Now in 1950, the Korean War started, reopened the base. So I got a tailor shop there at the base.
So you were a tailor, which I think is Schneider in German.
Yes.
Schneider.
Yes. So
looks good.
I don't know. So I lived in there. Then with my cousin, like that, we got both of us the base, the tailor shop, and I was there for 7 years. And then I said I used to come every weekend to Los Angeles. So then I said after 7 years, I'm going to go to Los Angeles and open a store here in Los Angeles.
What kind of store?
Was a military store, military uniforms. I opened a store on Melrose, next block from Paramount Studio. Opened a store, and we were there for 37 years.
Oh.
Until 1994, I retired. And most of the movies you saw, military movies, in 1994, were uniforms came from our store.
Ah,
Movie, TVs,
how
Top
did you meet
Gun,
you?
Top
How did,
Gun.
what did you say?
They were
Outfits for movies, TV, and what else?
movies, TV, and in motion picture.
How did you meet your wife?
I met my wife after being here for 7 years. I went to started that store with a partner. Said, "You fix up the store. I'm taking a big vacation." I had 7 years. I didn't have any vacation, and I went back to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where I was when I came here. And I came back there. Actually, it sound maybe funny. I just called a friend up I knew when I was there. We were very close friends. And she says, "Oh, you probably already married, a couple of kids." So I said, "No." "So you want to meet somebody?" The girl said, "Yes." So she gave me a phone number, which when I lived in Harrisburg, I knew they had this woman because the men I was working with, we used to go out on picnics and her sister I knew because we used to meet at the Jewish Y in Harrisburg every night. So I knew her sister, and that was a friend of her sister. So they gave me the number, and I called her, and we were going out almost every day. And that was time for me to come back. I only had about 2 weeks left to come back. So I said to her, "I have to go back, but you come out. You come out after I get back." She said, "No, by myself, I wouldn't go. I wouldn't come." So then I said, "Okay, then let's get married." So we got married and knew each other 2 weeks.
So you knew each other 2 weeks, you got married, and what year was this?
That was 1957.
And how long were you married? How many children?
I was married for 38 years. And my wife passed away. Actually, it's now going to be 27 years. She had the uterine cancer. Yeah.
Right. And you had 2 children or 3? You have
two children, a daughter and a son.
You have 2 children. Now, I know people are going to want to ask this. Were you raised believing in a God? How were you raised religiously? And then how did you get through all these terrible times still believing in a God?
I was raised Orthodox, actually. You see, we had, I don't know, I'll show you I don't know if you can see this here, a picture. That's a group, what we call a Jewish free loan, where you're giving loans to poor people, without interest. And my father was the secretary for this. So he leased, the group rented a room in our house. And they met once a month, about 2-3 hours, and the rest was empty. So my dad made a synagogue. And we used to have service every Friday night, Saturday, and holidays. So we had a synagogue in our house. And I was right, we were very Orthodox. Actually, you're asking a question, something, how I believe in God or something. I've been talking to maybe hundreds of thousands of students here, high school, middle school, and high school. And I've told them, like I saw people in Birkenau running to the fence to get executed, to get electrocuted or beaten to death because they gave up. So they asked me, "Did you ever think of giving up?" I said, "No, I never did. I never lost faith, and I never stopped believing in God. And I said, I may have a bad day today, but I hope tomorrow will be a better day. But I never give up. Then I get letters from those kids. I have thousands of letters what I get from the kids. And they repeat that word that I tell them to remember never to give up.
Your girlfriend Riva, she said when I met you and your girlfriend in Moore Park at your lecture,
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
said you wake up like this, you don't hold grudges, you
No,
don't hold
I
resentment, you're very positive. Can you tell us about your wonderful attitude?
no, I don't carry grudges, because if you carry a grudge, you make yourself sick. That's what it is. So that's why. What's the reason? Why is it carry grudges? So I don't carry grudges.
Someone by the name of Tova asked, how, right after the war, how were you able to wake up in the morning? How did you get yourself out of bed after having such terrible experience?
Well, a little experience. You wake up in the morning and you say, "Thank God I'm alive." You know, because my family and I lost hundreds of cousins, aunts, and uncles, and they're not here. So I'm still alive. So thank God, I said, I'm still alive.
Thank God. What was your message for young people, teenagers, adults? What would you say to help us for the next generation?
As the next generation is, it's, there's a lot of anti-Semitism going on. So that's when I talk to the school kids. I tell them, first of all, I tell them, 6 million Jews were murdered. They weren't murdered because they were criminals or did anything wrong, just because they were Jews. And there's a lot of Holocaust deniers now. So I call them they're crazy, because the evidence, the gas chambers and the ovens are still in existence today. You go to any Dachau, Majdanek, Treblinka, Auschwitz, the ovens are still there. And I've been back and I saw people, buses coming every day, thousands of people from all over the world to witness this. So that's why I call this Holocaust denier, they're crazy. I said to them, don't listen what they tell you. That's what I tell them. And the main thing is now is education. You have to educate the kids, the young kids. I was told, the high school kids I talked to, that 70% of them never heard about the Holocaust. And that's what's bad. So that's why you have to educate the young people. That's the most important thing now.
And how did you feel about, there were people during the last 2 years during the virus, when they heard the word passport, for example, my son couldn't go into restaurants in Los Angeles without a passport, because if you didn't inject yourself, you couldn't get a passport. How did you feel about the passports with those injections? That you couldn't, some people are losing their jobs, you couldn't go into stores?
Well, that's bad. It's very bad, because that's how it happened in Germany. That's how it started in Germany. Now in Germany, because the Jews in Germany, on their passport, they had to have a J, put a J on it. So there's Jude, that is Jewish. This is very wrong here, what they're doing.
And
It's
what
very
about
wrong.
the injections? I have a friend who lost his job in pharmaceutical. I know a few nurses that lost their job. If you didn't get that injection, it seemed like for some people it wasn't really a choice. What did you think of that? Not having choice for the injections?
That's wrong, because We only got one shot. We didn't get any boosters or anything. We got the Johnson & Johnson. That's all. I don't get any boosters. I don't care about it because the booster doesn't do anything. So that's wrong. They shouldn't be penalized because they choose not to do it.
And what advice would you give if you're speaking to children or a governor or a president? How would you say to make sure this doesn't happen again to Jewish people or any group?
Well, that's the only way. What we can do is the only way to educate the public what happened. So that's the only way we can preserve from happening again. It's the only way is through education.
And Joe, I have two more questions unless you have more comments. Mine is, part of my show is about miracles and visits from God. A lot of people I interview had a very hard life, abuse from parents and other people. And sometimes they'll hear the voice of God, or they had a brief moment, a heart attack or a drowning, where they were visiting heaven. During the Holocaust or afterwards, did you ever have any dreams that seemed real? Did you have anyone visiting you possibly in dreams, or some kind of miracle where you got help, something from God?
Well, people ask me a lot. Do you have any dreams? And I never had any bad dreams. Not that I recall any bad dreams. I never had any bad dreams. So it's like, let me tell you, if God wouldn't be looking over me, I wouldn't be here today. Because I had two cases. If I didn't get out of the Warsaw ghetto, I would be where my parents, my brothers and sisters were. So see, God made me get out. God looked over me. And the same thing happened when Dr. Mengele told me to go to the left. See, but God told me to run back to the other side. So to me, especially this Birkenau, I call it I was reborn again. Because if I would stay at the left, I would go straight to the gas chamber. So God has been looking over me. He tries to keep me so I can tell people what happened. So that's what I'm doing.
My son asked me a question about food. You were sometimes 3 days in a cattle car. You were walking many kilometers. How did you survive without food and water?
Well, I guess I don't know because I was never a big eater. So maybe that's how I survive. Some people need a lot of food. I was never a big eater.
Joe, did you also start out chubby because right away they weren't feeding you? Were you muscly, or were you chubby? Maybe you had fat that helped you survive in the beginning?
No, actually, I wasn't muscly, but I showed you pictures.
Poland. What was Polish life for you then? Was there anti-Semitism? Were Jewish people not allowed to go to certain colleges? How did Poland treat the Jewish people before Germany?
No, there was no anti-Semitism in Poland before. No. No, the only time started actually was in 1938. After Germany, about the Kristallnacht.
Kristallnacht.
Yeah. After that, we had a few people walking in front of our store, even with like, "Don't buy for the Jews," don't buy from the Jews.
So someone put a sign on your door that said, "Don't buy from these Jews"?
Not a sign. They were walking with the sign.
Oh.
But people didn't pay attention.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I usually, I get every year, I get a New Year's card from Dhaka. A New Year's card. Happy New Year. I get it every year. I get it now since I was there.
And for people who want to hear more of your story, have you been? I know Steven Spielberg is recording everyone. Were you recorded with Steven Spielberg? Where else is your story?
Yes, I was recorded with Steve. I was recorded with Spielberg in 1994. So the Shaw Foundation, they have my tape there. And there's a lot of tapes out. This is a picture. It showed this how we lived in the camp. Those like shelves, and there was one section was for 3 people.
So you lived on wood shelves.
Yes, good. Well, I also let people know they should go to visit the museum. It's that's called the museum, Holocaust Museum, Los Angeles. You should go to visit the museum. It's very nice, very easy to see and to get to it. It's located in the Pan Pacific Park, back of the Grove.
When are you going to be 101?
What's today? Tomorrow is the 1st. In 20 days.
So November 21 is your birthday. November 20 or 21?
20. November 20, I'll be 100.
Wow. Happy birthday and Mazal Tov.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good to meet you again, Mr. Alexander. Thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure and it's my honor to talk to you.
Thank you. And it's my honor to be able to share your story.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander.
You're welcome.